The silent signal. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of Meridian Prime as Director Elena Vasquez walked through the colony's main agricultural district. 3 years had passed since the first settlers arrived on this world, and what they had built amazed her every day. The golden grain stretched to the horizon, swaying gently in the warm breeze that carried the scent of growing things and the promise of another successful harvest. Elena paused at the edge of Tom Bradley's farm, watching the veteran agriculturalist check his crop sensors. Tom had been one of the first volunteers for the Meridian Prime project, leaving behind a comfortable life on Earth to help establish humanity's most ambitious colony yet. At 62, he still worked the fields every day, his weathered hands as capable with advanced farming equipment as they had been with traditional tools back on Earth. "Another record yield this season," Tom called out, wiping sweat from his forehead as he noticed Elena approaching. "The soil adaptation program is working better than we ever hoped. Dr. Chen's modifications to the local bacteria are helping our crops grow 30% faster than standard Earth varieties." Elena smiled at the mention of Dr. Marcus Chen, the colony's chief scientist who had made the agricultural miracle possible. Marcus had spent 2 years studying Meridian Prime's unique ecosystem before approving it for large-scale farming. His research station on the hill overlooking the main settlement buzzed with activity as his team of 40 researchers continued their work to optimize crop production and ensure the colony's long-term sustainability. The settlement itself had grown from a few prefabricated structures to a proper city of 1.8 million people. Children played in parks between the residential districts while their parents worked in the various industries that kept the colony functioning. Schools, hospitals, shopping centers, and entertainment facilities had sprouted up to serve the growing population. Meridian Prime had everything a thriving human community needed: purpose, prosperity, and peace. Elena made her way to the administration building in the city center, passing through streets busy with the daily rhythm of colonial life. Shop owners opened their businesses, teachers headed to schools, and engineers maintained the fusion reactors and atmospheric processors that made life possible on this distant world. The sight never failed to fill her with pride. As a former Earth diplomat, she had seen many failed colony attempts, but Meridian Prime was different. It was succeeding beyond anyone's wildest expectations. "Good morning, Director," called Captain Sarah Mitchell as Elena entered the building. Sarah served as the colony's security chief, a role that had been largely ceremonial until recently. A former Earth Defense Force officer, she maintained the colony's small security force and operated the long-range sensors that monitored local space for incoming ships. "Quiet night on the sensor grid. Just the usual automated cargo vessels passing through the outer system." Elena nodded and continued to her office, where she spent the morning reviewing reports and approving routine administrative matters. Housing. Construction was ahead of schedule, school enrollment was up 15% from last quarter, and medical reports showed the colonists adapting well to their new world. It was exactly the kind of boring, peaceful day that made colonial administration so rewarding. The afternoon brought meetings with department heads to discuss expansion plans. The colony's success had attracted attention back on Earth, and the next wave of settlers would arrive in 6 months. Elena was reviewing construction proposals for additional residential districts when Dr. Marcus Chen burst into her office without knocking. "Elena, we have a problem," Marcus said, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious worry. "Sarah needs you in the sensor control room immediately. We're detecting multiple ships approaching the system." Elena followed Marcus through the corridors to the sensor control room, where Captain Mitchell stood surrounded by worried technicians staring at their displays. The large central screen showed dozens of contacts moving toward Meridian Prime from deep space, still several days away but approaching at high speed in a tight military formation. "How many ships?" Elena asked, studying the sensor data. 47 confirmed contacts, Sarah replied, all showing military-grade armor and weapon signatures. They're not responding to our standard greeting protocols. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Unknown military ships refusing communication was never a good sign, but she tried to remain optimistic. "Keep trying to contact them," Maybe their communication systems operate on different frequencies than ours. For the next 18 hours, Dr. Chen and his communications team broadcast messages on every frequency they could generate. They tried mathematical sequences, musical patterns, pictographic representations, and even basic universal constants. The approaching ships maintained their course and speed, ignoring every attempt at peaceful contact. "They'll reach orbit in 36 hours, Sarah reported during an emergency meeting in the administration building. "I've activated our defensive systems, but we're not equipped to handle a force this size." Meridian Prime's defenses consisted of orbital shield generators around the main settlement, and some repurposed mining lasers that could theoretically serve as weapons. They were designed to protect against pirates or space debris, not a coordinated military assault by dozens of warships. Elena made the decision that would haunt her final hours. "Dr. Chen, prepare a detailed message to Earth. Include everything our sensors have recorded about these ships. If something happens to us, Earth needs to know what we're facing." Marcus nodded grimly and headed to the communication center with his team. They compiled sensor data, tactical analysis, and personal messages from colonists trying to reach their families back home. The data package was massive, containing everything they knew about the approaching threat and the thriving colony that might soon be destroyed. As the alien ships entered the Meridian Prime system, they finally responded to human communications. But instead of words, they sent weapons fire. Plasma bolts lanced down from orbit, striking the colony's shield generators in a coordinated attack that overwhelmed the defensive systems within minutes. "They're jamming our communications," Dr. Chen reported as explosions rocked the settlement. "I can't get through to Earth." Elena looked out her office window and saw fires starting in the residential districts where families had been living peaceful lives just hours before. The attacking ship showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. They were systematically destroying everything the colonists had built. "The communication array is still functional," Marcus called out over the sound of alarms. "If I can boost the power output, I might be able to punch through their jamming." Elena nodded. "Do it, whatever it takes." Marcus and his team fought their way through the burning building to the emergency communication station. Plasma fire from the orbiting ships was getting closer, reducing sections of the city to rubble with each passing minute. The aliens were thorough in their destruction, targeting not just defensive installations but schools, hospitals, and homes. Working frantically as the building shook around them, Marcus managed to establish a brief communication window with Earth. The transmission would take 8 months to reach home, but it was their only chance to warn humanity about what was happening. "This is Dr. Marcus Chen at Meridian Prime Colony." He spoke into the emergency transmitter as explosions got closer. "We are under attack by an alien species calling themselves the HFY. 47 warships attacked without warning or provocation. They ignored all peaceful contact attempts. Colony population 1.8 million, all civilians." The building shuddered as alien fire struck the power station. Emergency lights flickered, and Marcus knew he had only seconds left. The HFY appear to be reptilian, with technology similar to our own but superior numbers. They gave no warning and showed no mercy. We offered no resistance. "This is an unprovoked attack on innocent people. Tell our families we tried to make peace. Tell them we never hurt anyone, we just wanted to grow food and raise our children in peace." The transmission cut out as the communication center collapsed. Dr. Marcus Chen, Director Elena Vasquez, Captain Sarah Mitchell, Tom Bradley, and everyone else on Meridian Prime died that day. The HFY left no survivors and moved on to scout for other human worlds, believing they had eliminated a minor threat with minimal effort. But Marcus's message was already traveling through space, carrying the last words of 1.8 million people, and everything humanity would need to know about the species that had just made a catastrophic mistake. The signal crossed the void between stars, a digital ghost carrying news of genocide and a cry for justice that would soon reshape the entire galaxy. 8 months later, when the impossible transmission reached Earth, it would trigger a response that the HFY could never have imagined. They had killed innocent people and thought there would be no consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Iron Response Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in her office at Earth Defense Command, staring out at the sprawling military complex that coordinated humanity's defense across dozens of star systems. At 55, she had spent 30 years protecting human space from pirates, raiders, and the occasional border dispute with alien trading partners. Nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for the message that had just arrived from the Meridian system. The transmission had been forwarded to her office within minutes of being decoded. Dr. Marcus Chen's final words echoed in her mind as she watched the recording for the third time. The images showed a thriving colony, happy families, and peaceful agricultural communities. Then came the weapon signatures, explosion patterns, and the desperate final transmission as 1.8 million innocent people were murdered without warning. "Get me President Morgan," Rebecca said to her aide. "Priority Alpha clearance. Tell him it's about Meridian Prime." President David Morgan arrived at the Pentagon within the hour, bringing with him the key members of his cabinet and military leadership. David had been president for 2 years, elected on a platform of peaceful expansion and diplomatic cooperation with alien species. The video from Meridian Prime challenged everything he believed about humanity's place in the galaxy. "How many people lived on Meridian Prime?" David asked after watching Dr. Chen's transmission. 1.8 million, Rebecca replied. "All civilians, families, farmers, scientists, teachers, children." The colony had been completely peaceful for 3 years. No military installations, no weapons research, no territorial disputes. They were growing food and building a better life. General Lisa Park, the Marine Corps commander, studied the tactical data from the attack. The Kethvar used overwhelming force against defenseless targets. This wasn't a military engagement, it was genocide. David stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where millions of people lived their normal lives, unaware that everything was about to change. "Admiral Torres, what would you recommend as an appropriate response?" Rebecca had been asking herself the same question for hours. "Mr. President, the Kethvar have committed an act of war against human civilians. They murdered 1.8 million innocent people without provocation. In my professional opinion, this requires a complete military response." "Define complete," David said quietly. "Full mobilization of Earth's industrial capacity. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource we have should be dedicated to building the largest military force in human history. We need to make sure this never happens again." David turned back to face his advisors. "How long would such a mobilization take?" 18 months, Rebecca replied. "Maybe less if we convert civilian infrastructure. We have the technology and the industrial base. What we need is the will." President Morgan made the decision that would define his presidency and humanity's future in the galaxy. "Admiral, you have full authorization for complete military mobilization. I want every shipyard in human space building warships. Convert civilian vessels if necessary. Call up reserves, activate emergency production protocols, and prepare for the largest military operation in human history." That evening, President Morgan addressed not just Earth, but every human colony, space station, and ship in human space. His speech was broadcast across the galaxy, and his words were simple but devastating. "Fellow humans," he began, 8 months ago, the peaceful colony of Meridian Prime was completely destroyed by an alien species called the Kethvar. 1.8 million innocent people were murdered without warning, negotiation, or cause. Men, women, and children who had never harmed anyone were killed simply because they existed and were human. The president paused, letting the weight of his words settle across human space. "This unprovoked act of genocide against human civilians will not stand. We are mobilizing everything we have. The Kethvar will learn that there are consequences for murdering innocent people. They will learn that humanity protects its own." The response was immediate and unprecedented. Every shipyard from Luna to the Centauri colonies received mobilization orders. Construction crews worked around the clock building warships of every size and classification. The industrial might of human civilization, spread across dozens of star systems, focused on a single goal: justice for Meridian Prime. Captain Jake Reynolds commanded the heavy cruiser UES Vengeance when the mobilization orders came through. A veteran of the colonial defense forces, he had seen combat against pirates and raiders, but never anything approaching the scale of what was being planned. 800,000 ships? His executive officer asked, staring at the preliminary fleet estimates. That's impossible, sir. No one has ever built a fleet that size. Read the authorization codes, Jake replied. This comes directly from the President and the Defense Council. We're really doing this. Across human space, the same scene played out hundreds of times. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels and passenger liners converted to military production. Mining operations in asteroid belts extracted raw materials at unprecedented rates. Weapons factories operated continuously, producing missiles, plasma cannons, and defensive systems for the growing fleet. The call for volunteers brought in millions of people. Young men and women who had never considered military service enlisted to crew the new ships. Retired veterans came out of civilian life to train new recruits. Entire families volunteered together, determined to ensure that Meridian Prime's fate would never befall another human world. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a civilian engineer from the Mars shipyards, found herself retrofitting merchant vessels with military-grade weapons and armor. How many ships are we supposed to convert? She asked her supervisor. All of them, came the reply. Every hull that can mount a weapon system gets converted. Every civilian ship that can carry Marines gets pressed into service. We are building the most powerful military force in galactic history. The Kethvar, meanwhile, remained unaware of the storm gathering in human space. War leader Zekthar, who had commanded the attack on Meridian Prime, sent routine reports to his superiors describing the easy victory over the weak human settlement. Intelligence estimates suggested humanity possessed perhaps 30,000 ships across all their colonies, barely enough to defend their core worlds. The humans are no threat, Zekthar reported to the Kethvar High Command. Their colony offered no resistance. These mammals are clearly a weak species suitable for conquest or elimination. 18 months after Dr. Chen's message reached Earth, the impossible became reality. 800,000 human warships gathered in the Sol system, the largest military force ever assembled by any species in known galactic history. The fleet stretched across millions of kilometers, organized into battle groups that could devastate entire star systems. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Retribution, looking out at a fleet that defied imagination. Dreadnoughts longer than city blocks moved alongside swift destroyers and cruisers. Carrier groups launched fighter squadrons for final training exercises. Supply ships carried enough ammunition and fuel for months of sustained warfare. Final fleet count confirmed, reported her communications officer. 800,000 vessels ready for departure, all crews at battle stations. Rebecca nodded slowly. In her 3 decades of military service, she had never imagined commanding such a force. No human had, because nothing like this had ever existed before. Signal all vessels, she commanded. Destination, Kethvar space. Mission, complete destruction of their military capability. Rules of engagement, military targets only, but show no mercy to those targets. The fleet began its journey toward Kethvar territory, carrying with it the collective will of humanity. The aliens had killed innocent people and thought there would be no consequences. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. When the human fleet arrived in Kethvar space, the sight was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. 800,000 warships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons charged and ready for battle. The Kethvar's 50,000 ships spread across their 17 worlds suddenly seemed pitifully small. War leader Zekthar, faced with odds of 16-1, sent a desperate message to Admiral Torres. We did not know you were a warrior species. We will withdraw from human space and pay compensation for our error. Rebecca's response was broadcast throughout the galaxy. You murdered 1.8 million innocent people. You will face the consequences. There will be no negotiation. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Kethvar military had ceased to exist. Their shipyards, weapons factories, and military installations were reduced to debris. Not a single human ship was lost. Admiral Torres sent one final message, transmitted to every species in the galaxy. This is Admiral Rebecca Torres of the Earth Defense Force. The species known as the HFY committed genocide against human civilians. They have been held accountable. Let this serve as notice to all: humanity protects its own. We seek peace, but we will respond to aggression with overwhelming force. Choose your actions wisely. The message spread across the galaxy, carried by traders, diplomats, and news services. Within months, every major species had received the same warning. Humanity, the species many had dismissed as weak mammals, had assembled the most powerful military force in galactic history to avenge their murdered civilians. The galaxy took notice. Treaties were signed, diplomatic channels opened, and trade agreements negotiated. No one wanted to face 800,000 human warships over a misunderstanding. But on Earth, in a small cemetery outside the capital, a simple monument was erected to the memory of Meridian Prime. The inscription read, "To the 1.8 million souls of Meridian Prime, who wanted only to grow food and raise their children in peace, you were not forgotten. Justice was served." Dr. Marcus Chen's final message had traveled across space to deliver its warning. 800,000 ships had carried humanity's answer. The galaxy would remember both lessons for a very long time.